Zena wasn't looking for a new pet when she moved to Pine Grove, a small town tucked away in the mountains. Her tiny apartment barely had room for her belongings, let alone another living being. But life had other plans. It started on a cold October morning. Zena was walking to the local coffee shop where she worked as a barista when she noticed a black cat sitting on the sidewalk. What caught her attention wasn't its color or size, but how it watched everything around it. Most cats she knew would run away when people came close, but this one just sat there, observing. The cat was there again the next day and the day after that. Always in the same spot, always watching. Zena started calling it Shadow, though she had no plans to adopt it. "Just passing by, Shadow," she would say each morning, and the cat would blink slowly at her. One day, Zena noticed Shadow wasn't alone. Next to it sat an old lunchbox, battered and rusty. Inside were 5 tiny kittens, their eyes barely open. "Oh no," Zena said, kneeling down. "Where did they come from?" Shadow didn't move away when Zena came closer. Instead, it stood up and walked to her, rubbing against her legs. The kittens in the box started making small sounds. "I can't take them," Zena told herself. "My apartment is too small. I work long hours. It wouldn't be fair." But as she said this, she was already taking off her jacket to wrap around the box of kittens. At work, Zena couldn't focus. During her break, she called every animal shelter in town, but they were all full. "Winter's coming," said one volunteer. "Everyone's bringing in strays. We just don't have space." That evening, Zena found herself at the pet store, buying cat food and supplies she couldn't really afford. "Just until I find them homes," she told herself. Shadow followed her home, carrying one of the kittens by the scruff of its neck while Zena carried the others. Her apartment felt different that night. The empty corners were now filled with small meows and the sound of tiny paws learning to walk. Shadow sat by the window, still watching, but now watching over its family. Days turned into weeks. Zena put up kittens for adoption posters around town. People came to look, but no one took any. "They need to stay together," each person would say. "I can't take all of them." Meanwhile, something strange started happening in Pine Grove. Break-ins were reported in several houses, but nothing was ever stolen. Instead, residents found their kitchen cupboards open and food scattered on the floor. The local police were confused. Third house this week, Zena overheard Officer Thorne telling her boss at the coffee shop. Always the same pattern. They get in through small openings, make a mess in the kitchen, and leave. No fingerprints, no footprints, nothing stolen. That same evening, Zena noticed Shadow acting weird. The cat kept going to the window, meowing at something outside. When Zena looked, she saw other cats, dozens of them, gathering in the alley behind her building. She had never seen so many cats in one place. They weren't fighting or making noise. They were just sitting there, like Shadow used to do, watching and waiting. The next morning, Zena found Shadow gone. The kittens were sleeping peacefully, but their mother had disappeared. She worried all day at work, barely noticing when Officer Thorne came in talking about another break-in. But this time was different. "We found paw prints," he said. "Cat paw prints, all over the kitchen. And get this, the only things touched were canned tuna and cat food." Zena's mind started racing. The cats she'd seen, the break-ins, the stolen food. Could it all be connected? And where was Shadow? That night, she stayed up late, watching from her window. Around midnight, she saw Shadow walking down the street, followed by several other cats. Each carried something in their mouth, pieces of food, small packages, anything they could grab. Zena followed them quietly. The cats led her to an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. Through a broken window, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. Inside, illuminated by moonlight, were cats. Hundreds of them. And they weren't just eating the stolen food, they were sharing it. Older cats were letting kittens eat first. Injured cats were being brought food by others. It was like nothing Zena had ever seen. In the middle of it all was Shadow, helping organize this unusual gathering. The cat that had seemed like a quiet observer was actually leading the largest community of strays Zena had ever seen. Standing there in the cold, Zena realized she had stumbled upon something much bigger than a few hungry cats. This was about survival, about taking care of each other when nobody else would. And somehow, Shadow had known Zena would understand. Zena stood at the warehouse window for a long time, watching. She saw how the cats had made spaces for the young and old ones using old blankets and cardboard boxes. Some cats were cleaning others who seemed too weak to do it themselves. At one point, she saw Shadow helping a limping cat get to the food pile. The next morning, Zena went straight to Dr. Rook, the town's only vet. She found him getting ready to close his clinic for lunch. "You need to see something," she said, and told him everything about Shadow, the kittens, the warehouse, and the hundreds of cats living there. Dr. Rook listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "I've been in Pine Grove for 30 years, he said. "Every winter, we lose many stray cats to cold and hunger. This year, I haven't found a single dead cat. Now I know why." They made a plan. Dr. Rook would check all the cats in the warehouse, give them shots, and help the sick ones. But they needed a better solution than stealing food. "We can't tell the police," Zena said. "They might take the cats away or close the warehouse." "No," Dr. Rook agreed. "But we can tell others who might help." Over the next few days, Zena talked to people she trusted, her boss at the coffee shop, some regular customers, her neighbors. She was careful about who she told, always watching their reactions. Some thought she was crazy, but others wanted to help. Maple, the owner of the grocery store, started putting boxes of expired cat food behind her shop instead of throwing them away. Old Lady Wren, who lived next to the warehouse, began leaving her back porch light on and putting out water bowls. Even Officer Thorne's daughter, after hearing about the cats from her father, started a fundraiser at her school. The cat break-ins stopped. Now that they had a steady supply of food, the cats didn't need to steal anymore. But they kept their home in the warehouse, which Dr. Rook discovered belonged to no one. The company that owned it had gone out of business years ago. Winter came and with it, snow. The warehouse got cold. Zena and the others who knew about the cats brought blankets and helped patch up holes in the walls. They built shelters using old boxes and straw, following designs they found online. Shadow still came to visit Zena's apartment every day, checking on the kittens that were now growing bigger. They had personalities of their own. One loved to climb everything, another would sleep only in Zena's shoes, and the smallest one followed Shadow everywhere. One morning, Zena woke up to find Shadow scratching at her door. This was unusual. Shadow normally came in through the window she left open. When she opened the door, Shadow ran down the stairs, stopping at each landing to make sure Zena was following. The cat led her to the warehouse. Inside, Zena found a group of cats surrounding something in a corner. As she got closer, she saw it was a dog, a small, skinny thing, shivering from cold. Instead of chasing the dog away, the cats were lying around it, keeping it warm. Shadow walked over and started cleaning the dog's face. The dog, too weak to move, just closed its eyes. "Well," Zena said, picking up the dog carefully. "Looks like we're not just helping cats anymore." Dr. Rook wasn't surprised when Zena brought the dog to his clinic. "They're smarter than we think," he said, checking the dog's injuries. "They know when someone needs help." The dog, which they named River, got better. But instead of finding it a new home, they let it stay at the warehouse. River became part of the cat community, playing with kittens and sharing the food that was brought. Other animals started showing up, more dogs, a few rabbits that had escaped from someone's garden, even an old parrot that could only say, "pizza," and "goodbye." The warehouse became a safe place for any animal that needed help. The warehouse was changing. What started as a place for cats became something bigger. People who knew about it started calling it the safe place. They would bring food, blankets, and toys. Some came just to spend time with the animals. One day, Officer Thorne himself showed up at the coffee shop where Zena worked. "So," he said, sitting at the counter, "I hear you know something about all those cats." Zena's hands shook as she made his coffee. She had been worried about this day. "My daughter won't stop talking about it," he continued. "She says you're helping them, that it's not just cats anymore." "Are you going to shut it down?" Zen asked. Officer Thorne took a long sip of his coffee. "You know, before I became a police officer, I worked at an animal shelter. Hardest job I ever had. Having to turn away animals because we didn't have space." He paused. "What you're doing, it's good. The town needs something like this." That conversation changed everything. With Officer Thorne's help, they made the warehouse legal. He talked to the town council, and they agreed to let them use the building if they followed proper safety rules. More people started helping. The high school woodworking class built proper shelters. Local restaurants saved their leftover food. Dr. Rook trained volunteers to help take care of sick animals. Shadow was still there, watching over everything. The 5 kittens from the lunchbox were now grown cats, helping take care of new animals that arrived. River, the dog they had saved, became known for finding lost animals and bringing them to the warehouse. One morning, Zena arrived to find a school bus parked outside. Inside the warehouse, Old Lady Wren was showing a group of children how to play with the cats safely. "They need to learn kindness early," she told Zena. The safe place became famous in nearby towns. People would drive for hours to bring animals they couldn't keep or to adopt ones that needed homes. But they had a rule: no one had to leave. Animals could stay as long as they wanted. A year after finding Shadow and the kittens, Zena sat in her apartment, which now felt too big. She had moved to a larger place, one that could fit more animals. Shadow was there, lying on the windowsill, still watching the world outside. "You knew what you were doing, didn't you?" Zena asked the cat. "When you showed me those kittens, you knew I would help." Shadow just blinked slowly, the way cats do when they trust someone completely. The warehouse became more than just a place for animals. It became the heart of Pine Grove. Children would come after school to do their homework surrounded by cats. Old people would spend their afternoons there, finding comfort in the company of animals. Even the town's Christmas celebration was held there that year, with animals wearing soft ribbons and getting extra treats. But the most amazing thing was how the animals helped each other. Older cats would teach younger ones how to clean themselves. Dogs would guard sleeping kittens. The parrot, which now could say many more words, would alert everyone when a new animal arrived. One cold evening, much like the one when this all started, Zena walked home from work. She saw a cat sitting on the sidewalk, watching everything around it. For a moment she thought it was Shadow. But this was a different cat, and behind it was a cardboard box with something moving inside. Zena smiled. Some things never change. And sometimes that's exactly how it should be. The safe place continues to grow, not just in size but in heart. Every animal that arrives brings something new, a story, a need, a chance to help. And in the middle of it all is Shadow, the quiet observer who started it all, still watching, still caring, still showing that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. Some people in Pine Grove still talk about how it all began, with one cat, 5 kittens, and a person who stopped to help. But really, that's how most good things start, with someone taking the time to care. As for Zena, she never did become just a regular person with a regular life in a small town. Instead, she became part of something much bigger, something that made Pine Grove not just a place on a map, but a place where kindness had a home. And Shadow? Well, Shadow still sits in the window every evening, watching the sun go down over the town. But now, there's a smile in those watching eyes, the kind of smile that comes from knowing that sometimes, all it takes is one small act to change everything.